On the most important day of her life, poor Eleanor Hayes felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her fiancé, Lucas Caldwell, the millionaire heir to one of California's most respected wine empires, simply abandoned her at the altar without looking back. Humiliated and confused about what was happening, Eleanor vanished. But years later, she returned, rich, powerful, and, most importantly, with the proof of her innocence in hand, to Lucas's worst nightmare. The sun-drenched hills of Los Angeles wine country stretched out before Eleanor Hayes as she stood at the window of her family's sprawling estate. At 32, she was poised to become the queen of California's wine empire. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman of striking beauty, long chestnut hair, piercing green eyes, and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of ambition and resilience. Eleanor smoothed down her designer suit, a habit born of nervousness rather than vanity. Today was the day she'd dreamed of since childhood. Her wedding to Lucas Caldwell, the heir to Caldwell Vineyards, the largest wine producer in the state. Their union would not only join two hearts, but also two dynasties, creating an unparalleled force in the industry. As she made her way through the halls of Hayes Manor, the scent of roses and jasmine wafted through the air, a preview of the floral extravaganza awaiting in the gardens. Portraits of stern-faced Hayes ancestors watched her pass, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. Eleanor felt the weight of generations of expectations on her shoulders. "Eleanor, darling," her mother's voice, crisp as a newly pressed shirt, cut through her reverie. Victoria Hayes, a statuesque woman in her early 60s, approached with measured steps. "The guests are arriving. Are you ready?" Eleanor nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, Mother." Just taking a moment to breathe. Victoria's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before resuming their usual steely gaze. "Remember, this isn't just your day. This is the culmination of years of planning, of building alliances. The Hayes-Caldwell union will reshape the industry." "I know, Mother. I won't let you down." Victoria reached out, adjusting an errant strand of Eleanor's hair. "You never have. Now let's not keep everyone waiting." As they walked towards the garden, Eleanor's mind drifted to Lucas. They'd known each other since childhood, their relationship evolving from playmates to business partners to lovers. He was her rock, her confidant, the one person who saw beyond the Hayes heiress to the woman beneath. The garden was a vision of white and gold, with hundreds of guests seated in elegant chairs. At the far end stood an arch entwined with rare white roses, imported at great expense. Eleanor took her place at the entrance, her father appearing beside her to walk her down the aisle. George Hayes, a bear of a man with a booming laugh that belied his shrewd business acumen, looked at his daughter with pride. "Ready to knock 'em dead, Ellie?" Eleanor squeezed his arm. "Always, Dad." The music swelled, and all eyes turned to Eleanor as she began her walk. She felt a flutter of nerves but pushed it aside, focusing on Lucas waiting for her at the altar. His smile, usually so warm and reassuring, seemed strained today. Eleanor dismissed the thought, attributing it to wedding day jitters. As she reached Lucas, taking his hands in hers, Eleanor felt a surge of love and hope for their future. The officiant began the ceremony, his words washing over them as they gazed into each other's eyes. But then, just as they were about to exchange vows, Lucas's grip on her hands tightened painfully. His face, once full of joy, crumpled into an expression of anguish and betrayal. I can't do this," he whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden hush that fell over the gathering. Eleanor's world tilted on its axis. "Lucas, what are you talking about?" Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the seats. Madeline Caldwell, Lucas's cousin and Eleanor's longtime rival, stood up, her face a mask of righteous anger. "Stop this farce," she shouted, holding up her phone. "Everyone needs to see the truth about the woman Lucas is about to marry." With a few taps, Madeline projected a series of images onto the large screen meant for the wedding video. Eleanor's blood ran cold as she saw herself in intimate situations with another man. But it wasn't possible. She had never been unfaithful to Lucas. "These are lies," Eleanor cried out, turning to Lucas. "You know me. You know I would never do this." But doubt had already taken root in Lucas's eyes. He took a step back, shaking his head. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Eleanor." The garden erupted into chaos. Guests whispered and pointed, cameras flashed, and Eleanor stood frozen, her dream crumbling around her. She could hear her mother's sharp intake of breath, could feel her father's hand on her shoulder, trying to shield her from the prying eyes. "Lucas, please," Eleanor pleaded, reaching for him. But he turned away, walking swiftly down the aisle and out of the garden. Madeline followed, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. In the days that followed, Eleanor's life unraveled with breathtaking speed. The scandal was splashed across every tabloid and gossip site. "Wine heiress's secret affair exposed," the headlines screamed. Paparazzi camped outside Hayes Manor, their cameras capturing her every move. The business world, once at her feet, now turned its back on her. Investors pulled out of deals, citing concerns about the Hayes family's reputation. Eleanor watched helplessly as years of hard work and dedication were erased by a lie. Even within her own family, support was scarce. Victoria, ever mindful of appearances, kept her distance. "You've brought shame to this family," she said coldly during a tense family meeting. "We need to discuss damage control." George tried to be more supportive, but his efforts were clumsy at best. "We'll weather this storm, Ellie," he said, patting her hand awkwardly. "The Hayes family always comes out on top." But Eleanor knew the truth. There was no coming back from this, not in the world she had known. The whispers, the sidelong glances, the barely concealed glee of those who had always envied her success. It was all too much to bear. It was on a rain-soaked night, a week after the wedding disaster, that Eleanor made her decision. She stood in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by trophies and accolades that now seemed to mock her. With shaking hands, she packed a small bag with essentials and the few pieces of jewelry that were hers alone, not family heirlooms. As she zipped up the bag, her eyes fell on a photo of herself and Lucas, taken during happier times at one of their vineyards. The sight of his smiling face, once a source of comfort, now filled her with a mixture of pain and determination. "This isn't the end," she whispered to herself, a spark of the old Eleanor flaring to life. "It's just the beginning." With one last look around the room, Eleanor Hayes slipped out into the night, leaving behind the only life she had ever known. As she drove away from Hayes Manor, the rain beating a steady rhythm on the roof of her car, she made a vow to herself. She would reinvent herself, build a new identity far from the prying eyes of Los Angeles society. And one day, when the time was right, she would return. Not as the disgraced Eleanor Hayes, but as someone new, someone powerful enough to uncover the truth and reclaim what was rightfully hers. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time since her world had shattered, Eleanor felt a glimmer of hope. She was more than just a name, more than a scandal. She was a survivor, and she would prove it to the world and to herself. As the lights of Los Angeles faded in her rearview mirror, Eleanor took a deep breath. The old Eleanor Hayes died tonight, she thought. Tomorrow a new woman would be born. The harsh fluorescent lights of a small motel room flickered as Eleanor Hayes stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her once pristine chestnut hair was now a mousy brown, cut short and ragged. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, testament to sleepless nights filled with nightmares of her public humiliation. She barely recognized herself, and that was precisely the point. "Goodbye, Eleanor Hayes," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Hello, Veronica Lancaster." The name felt foreign on her tongue, but it was hers now. She had chosen it carefully, Veronica for strength, Lancaster for its connection to wine country, though far from California. It was the first step in her meticulously planned reinvention. With trembling hands, she opened a folder containing her new identity, forged documents, a backstory crafted with painstaking detail, and a small wad of cash, all procured through channels she never imagined she'd have to use. The Eleanor of a month ago would have been appalled. The Veronica of today knew it was necessary. As dawn broke over the dusty Arizona landscape, Veronica Lancaster embarked on her journey. Her destination, a small, family-owned vineyard in Oregon's Willamette Valley. It was as far from the glitz and glamour of Los Angeles as she could get while still staying in the industry she knew best. The drive north was long and lonely, giving Veronica ample time to rehearse her new persona. She was no longer the polished heiress to a wine empire, but a hard-working woman with a passion for viticulture and a desire to learn from the ground up. By the time she crossed the Oregon border, Eleanor Hayes felt like a distant memory. Arriving at Oak Ridge Vineyards, Veronica was struck by its rustic charm. Rolling hills covered in neat rows of vines stretched as far as the eye could see, so different from the manicured perfection of her family's estate. A weathered barn, repurposed as a tasting room, stood proudly at the entrance. "You must be Veronica," a gruff voice called out. An older man with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands approached, eyeing her skeptically. "I'm Frank Oakridge. Hope you're ready to work. We don't stand on ceremony here." Veronica squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to learn, Mr. Oakridge. Whatever you need me to do, I'm ready." Frank's expression softened slightly. "Well, all right then. Let's get you started." The next few weeks were a brutal awakening for Veronica. Her hands, once manicured to perfection, became calloused and stained. Her back ached from long hours bent over the vines, but with each passing day she felt stronger, more grounded. It was during a particularly grueling afternoon of harvest that Veronica met Sarah, Frank's daughter. Unlike her father's gruff exterior, Sarah was all warmth and easy smiles. "You're doing great, you know," Sarah said, handing Veronica a water bottle. "Dad's impressed even if he won't admit it." Veronica managed a small smile. "Thanks. It's different from what I'm used to." Sarah's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Oh, where did you work before?" For a moment, panic flared in Veronica's chest, but she had prepared for this. Small vineyard in New Zealand, family operation, wanted to see how things are done stateside. Sarah nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Well, you picked a good place to learn. Dad might be old school, but he knows his stuff." As the weeks turned to months, Veronica found herself settling into life at Oakridge. The work was hard, but honest. She learned every aspect of the winemaking process, from tending the vines to the intricacies of fermentation. In quiet moments, she allowed herself to feel a spark of the passion that had first drawn her to the industry. But even as Veronica Lancaster grew stronger, Eleanor Hayes's past refused to stay buried. Late at night, hunched over a laptop in her tiny rented room, she scoured the internet for news from Los Angeles. The scandal had died down, but its effects lingered. Hayes Vineyard stock had plummeted, and rumors swirled about a potential takeover by none other than Caldwell Vineyards. It was during one of these late-night searches that Veronica stumbled upon something odd. A small article, buried in the business section of a local LA paper, mentioned Madeline Caldwell's sudden rise in the company. She had been appointed to a high-level position, despite having little previous experience in the industry. Veronica's brow furrowed. Madeline had always been on the fringes of the family business, more interested in the social scene than actual work. This sudden career change felt convenient. Driven by a hunch, Veronica began digging deeper. She called in favors from old contacts, using a voice modulator to disguise her identity. Slowly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Madeline's financials showed large, unexplained deposits in the months leading up to Eleanor's ill-fated wedding. There were records of meetings with individuals known for their expertise in digital manipulation. And most damning of all, a series of encrypted emails between Madeline and an unknown party discussing a plan that would change everything. As the pieces fell into place, Veronica felt a cold fury building inside her. The betrayal ran deeper than she had ever imagined. Madeline hadn't just exposed a scandal, she had fabricated one, destroying Eleanor's life in the process. But fury gave way to determination. She now had a mission, a purpose beyond mere survival. She would uncover the full extent of Madeline's deception, clear her name, and reclaim what was rightfully hers. However, Veronica knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, resources, and most of all, a position of power within the industry. Oakridge Vineyards, for all its charm, was too small to serve her purposes. It was time to make a move. Over dinner one evening, Veronica broached the subject with Frank and Sarah. "I've been thinking," she began cautiously, "about expanding my experience. Maybe looking into some of the larger operations in the area." Frank's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Feeling too big for us already, are you?" "No, not at all," Veronica rushed to explain. "I've learned so much here, but I think to really understand the industry, I need to see how the bigger players operate." Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. "You know, that's not a bad idea. In fact, I heard Willamette Valley Vineyards is looking for someone to assist their head vintner. It could be a great opportunity." Frank grumbled, but there was a hint of pride in his voice. "Well, if you think you're ready for the big leagues, I suppose I could put in a good word." "You've earned it." Veronica felt a pang of guilt at the kindness in their eyes. These people had taken her in, taught her, trusted her. And here she was, using them as a stepping stone. But she steeled herself, remembering the bigger picture. This was necessary. Within weeks, Veronica found herself walking through the impressive facilities of Willamette Valley Vineyards. The scale of the operation dwarfed Oak Ridge, reminding her of the world she'd left behind. But this time she approached it with new eyes, seeing opportunities where once she saw only privilege. Her new position as assistant to the head vintner, Marcus Reeves, provided access to every aspect of the company's operations. Marcus, a brilliant winemaker with a penchant for innovation, took Veronica under his wing. "You've got a good palate," he remarked one day as they tasted a new blend. "And a head for the business side too, that's rare." Veronica allowed herself a small smile. "I'm a quick study." As she gained Marcus's trust, Veronica began to subtly influence decisions. She suggested new blends that took advantage of market trends she remembered from her Haze days. She streamlined processes, drawing on her business acumen. Slowly but surely, she was making herself indispensable. But even as Veronica Lancaster flourished, she never lost sight of her true goal. Every success at Willamette was a step towards reclaiming her past and exposing Madeline's treachery. It was during a wine industry conference in Seattle that Veronica's two worlds collided. She was manning the Willamette Valley booth when a familiar voice made her blood run cold. "I must say your Pinot Noir is exquisite." Veronica turned slowly, coming face to face with Madeline Caldwell. She was every bit as polished and poised as Veronica remembered, her smile sharp as a knife's edge. For a heart-stopping moment, Veronica feared recognition, but Madeline's eyes slid over her without a flicker of awareness. To her, Veronica Lancaster was just another faceless worker in the vast wine industry. "Thank you," Veronica managed, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We're quite proud of it." Madeline nodded absently, already losing interest. "Yes, well, keep up the good work. Caldwell Vineyards is always on the lookout for potential acquisitions." As Madeline sauntered away, Veronica gripped the edge of the booth, her knuckles white. The casual mention of acquisitions confirmed her suspicions. Madeline wasn't content with destroying Eleanor Hayes. She was systematically dismantling everything the Hayes family had built. That night, alone in her hotel room, Veronica made a decision. It was time to accelerate her plans. She had the skills, the knowledge, and now the motivation to take things to the next level. Over the next year, Veronica worked tirelessly. By day, she continued to excel at Willamette, earning promotions and accolades. By night, she built a network of contacts throughout the industry, always operating in the shadows, always as Veronica Lancaster. She invested what little money she had saved in small, strategic purchases, failing vineyards with good land, overlooked distributors with solid client bases. To the outside world, it appeared that a savvy new player was emerging in the wine industry. No one suspected that behind it all was a woman thought long gone. As her influence grew, so did her resources. Veronica hired a team of investigators, paying them handsomely to dig into Madeline's past and present. Slowly, irrefutably, the evidence mounted. It was on a rainy night, 2 years to the day since her ill-fated wedding, that Veronica finally held in her hands the proof she'd been searching for. Emails, financial records, sworn statements from the people Madeline had hired to doctor the photos. It was all there. Veronica sat back in her chair, a tumbler of wine in hand, and allowed herself a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had done it. She had the power to clear her name, to reclaim her legacy, to bring Madeline Caldwell crashing down. But as she sipped her wine, Veronica realized something had changed. The woman who started this journey, driven by pain and a thirst for vengeance, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had built something of her own, from the ground up. Yes, she would have her revenge, but it would be on her terms in a way that would reshape the entire industry. Eleanor Hayes had dreamed of being a queen. Veronica Lancaster would be an empire unto herself. As dawn broke over the vineyard, Veronica began to plan her next move. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The Los Angeles skyline glittered in the distance as Veronica Lancaster's private jet touched down at LAX. It had been 3 years since she'd last set foot in the city that had both made and destroyed her. As she stepped onto the tarmac, a flicker of the old Eleanor Hayes threatened to surface, a mixture of excitement and trepidation that she quickly suppressed. "Welcome back to Los Angeles, Ms. Lancaster," her assistant Michael said as he fell into step beside her. Your schedule for the week is confirmed. First up is the meeting with the board of Pacific Coast Distributors. Veronica nodded, her face a mask of cool professionalism. Excellent. And the other matter we discussed? Michael lowered his voice. It's arranged. You have a reservation at Spago under the name Sarah Oakridge for tomorrow night. He'll be there. A small smile played at the corners of Veronica's lips. Perfect. As her car wound through the familiar streets of Los Angeles, Veronica allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her return to the city wasn't just about business. It was the culmination of years of careful planning and positioning. Pacific Coast Distributors was the largest wine distributor on the West Coast, and acquiring it would give her the foothold she needed to challenge the Caldwell empire. But it was tomorrow night's dinner that truly set her pulse racing. After years of operating in the shadows, she was finally ready to bring one key player into her confidence, Lucas Caldwell. The next evening, Veronica sat at a secluded table in Spago, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. She'd chosen her appearance carefully for this meeting, hair swept up in an elegant chignon, a designer dress that whispered of wealth and taste. She looked every inch the successful businesswoman she'd become, with just a hint of the woman Lucas had once loved. When Lucas walked in, Veronica felt a jolt of recognition. He looked older, more careworn, but still handsome. His eyes scanned the restaurant, confusion evident on his face as he searched for Sarah Oakridge. Veronica stood, catching his attention. "Lucas," she said softly. The color drained from his face. "Eleanor?" he whispered, taking an involuntary step back. What are you doing here?" "Please sit down," Veronica said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I think it's time we had a long overdue conversation." Lucas sank into the chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "I don't understand. You disappeared. Everyone thought that I'd run away in shame, ended things?" Veronica's voice held a sharp edge. "I suppose that would have been convenient for everyone, wouldn't it?" Lucas flinched. "Eleanor, It's Veronica now," she interrupted. "Veronica Lancaster. And before you say another word, I need you to look at something." She slid a folder across the table. Lucas opened it, his brow furrowing as he began to read. Veronica watched as confusion gave way to shock, then to a dawning horror. "This can't be real," he muttered, flipping through the pages with increasing agitation. "Oh, it's very real," Veronica said calmly. "Every email, every transaction, every piece of evidence showing how your dear cousin Madeline orchestrated my downfall. The photos were fake, Lucas. All of it was a lie." Lucas looked up, his face ashen. "Eleanor, Veronica, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. I should have trusted you. I should have—" "Yes, you should have," Veronica cut him off, her tone icy. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm not looking for apologies or reconciliation. I'm here to offer you a choice." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Madeline's deception goes beyond just destroying me. She's been systematically weakening Hayes Vineyards, positioning Caldwell for a hostile takeover. Your father's legacy, everything your family has built, it's all at risk." Lucas shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Madeline wouldn't—" "She would, and she has," Veronica insisted. "And here's where you come in. I'm building something, Lucas. Something that could reshape the entire industry. I have the resources, the connections, and now the evidence to bring Madeline down. But I need someone on the inside of Caldwell Vineyards." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. "You want me to spy on my own family?" "I want you to save your family's true legacy," Veronica corrected. "Work with me, Lucas. Help me expose Madeline and stop her before she destroys everything. In return, I'll ensure that Caldwell Vineyards survives what's coming." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he looked up, determination settling over his features. "What do you need me to do?" As Veronica outlined her plan, she felt a shift in the air. This was the turning point she'd been working towards for years. With Lucas on her side, the final pieces of her strategy were falling into place. But even as she savored this victory, a new challenge emerged. As she and Lucas were leaving the restaurant, a flash of a camera caught them off guard. Veronica's blood ran cold as she recognized the photographer, a well-known paparazzo who had hounded her in her previous life. "Ms. Lancaster? Or should I say Ms. Hayes?" the photographer called out, snapping pictures rapidly. "Care to comment on your miraculous return from the dead?" Lucas moved to shield her, but Veronica stepped forward. her mind racing. This was an unforeseen complication, but perhaps it could work to her advantage. Veronica Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Wines, she said clearly, looking directly at the camera. And yes, formerly known as Eleanor Hayes. I think it's time the world knew the truth, don't you? The photographer's eyes widened at this unexpected candor. Veronica turned to Lucas, speaking loudly enough to be overheard. I believe we have a press conference to plan, Mr. Caldwell. Shall we? As they walked away, leaving the stunned photographer behind, Lucas whispered, Are you sure about this? Once it's out there. Veronica's smile was sharp. Oh, I'm counting on it. Madeline's had control of the narrative for too long. It's time to change the story. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Wine heiress returns. Eleanor Hayes alive and thriving as Veronica Lancaster. The story spread like wildfire through social media and news outlets. Veronica watched from her hotel suite as the industry she'd once been exiled from was thrown into chaos. Phone calls flooded in. Old contacts, investors, journalists, all clamoring for a statement. But Veronica had eyes for only one call. When her phone lit up with a blocked number, she answered on the first ring. Hello, Madeline, she said smoothly. I thought you might be getting in touch. There was a moment of tense silence before Madeline's voice came through, tightly controlled but with an undercurrent of panic. What do you think you're doing, Eleanor? Reclaiming what's mine, Veronica replied. And it's Veronica now. I would have thought you'd remember, given how much effort you put into erasing Eleanor Hayes. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Madeline hissed. You'll regret this. Veronica's laugh was cold. No, Madeline, you're the one who has no idea what's coming. But you will, soon. She ended the call, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over her. The gauntlet had been thrown. Now the real game would begin. Over the next few weeks, Veronica orchestrated a media blitz that kept the industry in constant upheaval. She gave select interviews, revealing pieces of Madeline's deception while hinting at even greater revelations to come. She positioned herself as not just a victim of betrayal, but as a phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to revolutionize the wine world. Behind the scenes, her team worked tirelessly. With Lucas's inside information, they were able to uncover even more of Madeline's machinations. Evidence of embezzlement, fraudulent wine classifications, and backroom deals that skirted the edge of legality, it all came to light. But Madeline wasn't going down without a fight. She launched a counteroffensive, trying to paint Veronica as a vengeful ex-heiress, spinning tales for attention. She used her connections to pressure distributors and retailers, threatening to cut off anyone who did business with Lancaster Wines. It was during this tumultuous time that Veronica received an unexpected visitor. She was working late in her office when her assistant announced that Sarah Oakridge was there to see her. Veronica's heart clenched. She hadn't spoken to Sarah since leaving Oakridge Vineyards, a decision that still filled her with guilt. Sarah walked in, her face a mixture of hurt and confusion. So, it's true then, she said quietly. You're not who you said you were. Veronica stood, moving around her desk. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. That you lied to us, that you used us as some sort of stepping stone in your revenge plot? It wasn't like that, Veronica insisted. Oakridge, you and your father, you saved me. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Then why didn't you trust us with the truth? Veronica sank into a chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past few years. Because I was scared. Because I didn't know who I could trust. And then, as time went on, I convinced myself it was safer for you not to know. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Veronica's surprise, she let out a small laugh. You know, Dad always said you were meant for bigger things than our little vineyard. Guess he was right. Veronica looked up, hope blossoming in her chest. Sarah, I am so sorry for deceiving you. You have every right to be angry. Oh, I'm angry, all right, Sarah said. But there was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. But I also know what it's like to fight for your place in this industry. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything. And I mean everything. And then we're going to figure out how Oakridge fits into this new world you're creating. As Veronica began to talk, she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. In Sarah, she rediscovered not just an ally, but a true friend. And she realized that in her quest for vengeance, she'd almost lost sight of the connections that truly mattered. With Sarah's support, Veronica found new strength. She expanded her strategy, focusing not just on taking down Madeline, but on reshaping the industry in a way that would benefit smaller family-owned vineyards like Oak Ridge. The climax came at the annual Wine Industry Summit in Napa Valley. Veronica had spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that it would define the future of her campaign. As she took the stage, facing a sea of industry leaders, journalists, and curious onlookers, Veronica felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was where she belonged. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I stand before you today not just as Veronica Lancaster, and not just as the woman once known as Eleanor Hayes. I stand before you as someone who has seen both the best and the worst of this industry we all love." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room. In the front row she saw Lucas, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. A few seats down, Madeline sat, her face a mask of cold fury. "For too long we've allowed greed and deception to corrupt the very foundations of our craft," Veronica continued. "We've turned a blind eye to practices that prioritize profit over quality, reputation over integrity. Today that changes." With a nod to her team, a series of documents appeared on the screen behind her. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the evidence of Madeline's crimes was laid bare. These documents show a systematic effort to undermine fair competition, to falsify wine classifications, and to consolidate power through illegal means, Veronica explained, her voice ringing with authority. "But this isn't just about one person's crimes. It's about the future of our industry." She outlined her vision, a return to ethical practices, support for small and mid-sized vineyards, and a commitment to innovation that didn't compromise quality. As she spoke, she could see the mood in the room shifting. Skepticism gave way to interest, then to excitement. "I'm not here to tear down what others have built," Veronica concluded. "I'm here to lift all of us up, to restore faith in the art of winemaking, to create a legacy we can all be proud of." The applause that followed was thunderous. As Veronica stepped down from the stage, she was immediately surrounded by people offering congratulations, support, and partnership opportunities. But her eyes sought out only one person. Madeline was pushing her way through the crowd, her face contorted with rage. As she reached Veronica, she grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "You think this is over?" Madeline snarled. "You have no idea what you've started." Veronica met her gaze steadily. "No, Madeline, this isn't over, it's just the beginning." As security led Madeline away, Veronica turned to face the sea of cameras and microphones suddenly thrust in her face. In that moment, she made a decision that would set the course for everything that followed. "I know you all have questions," she said, her voice carrying across the now hushed room. "And I promise, I will answer them all. But first, I think it's time we all raised a glass, to new beginnings, to justice, and to the future of wine." As flutes of champagne were hastily distributed, Veronica allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with legal battles and industry shakeups. But for the first time in years, she felt truly, completely alive. She had reclaimed her voice, exposed the truth, and set in motion changes that would ripple through the entire industry. Whatever came next, Veronica Lancaster was ready to face it head-on. As she raised her glass, catching the eyes of Sarah, Lucas, and the many others who had played a part in her journey, Veronica knew that this was more than just a personal victory. It was the dawn of a new era in the world of wine, one that she would shape with her own hands. The summit's aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. As security escorted a seething Madeline from the premises, Veronica found herself at the center of a media frenzy. Journalists clamored for exclusive interviews, industry leaders sought private meetings, and social media exploded with hashtags like Veronica Returns and Wine Industry Shake-Up trending worldwide. Amidst the chaos, Veronica maintained her composure, fielding questions with a mix of candor and calculated restraint. "I understand there are many questions," she addressed the crowd, her voice steady, "and I promise, in time, I will address them all. But tonight, let's focus on the future we can build together." As the evening wore on, Veronica navigated the room with the grace and poise of someone born for this moment. She engaged in conversations with small vineyard owners, discussing their challenges and brainstorming solutions. She reassured nervous investors, outlining her vision for ethical growth and sustainable practices. And all the while, she kept a watchful eye on Lucas, who seemed to be wrestling with his own internal conflict. It was well past midnight when Veronica finally retreated to her hotel suite, exhausted but exhilarated. As she kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine, a rich, complex Cabernet from Oak Ridge Vineyards, her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "You did it, V. Dad's beside himself with pride. Call me tomorrow. We have plans to make." Veronica smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. She had allies, true friends. It was something Eleanor Hayes, for all her wealth and status, had never really known. The next morning brought new challenges. Veronica awoke to news that Caldwell Vineyards had issued a statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action. It was a predictable move, but one that would need to be handled carefully. As she prepared for a day of meetings and interviews, Veronica received an unexpected call. The display showed a number she hadn't seen in years. Hayes Manor. With a deep breath, she answered, "Hello, Mother." Victoria Hayes's voice was as crisp and cold as ever. "Eleanor, or should I say, Veronica, you've caused quite a stir." "That was the intention," Veronica replied, keeping her tone neutral. There was a pause. Then Victoria spoke again, her voice softer than Veronica had ever heard it. "Your father, he always believed in you, you know, even after everything." Veronica felt a lump form in her throat. "And you, Mother? What did you believe?" "I believed what I thought I had to," Victoria said, a hint of regret coloring her words. "Perhaps it's time I learned to believe in something else." The conversation that followed was stilted, years of unspoken words and suppressed emotions, making it difficult for both women to express themselves fully. But by the end, a tentative bridge had been built. Victoria agreed to meet with Veronica in person, away from the prying eyes of the media. As she ended the call, Veronica felt a mix of emotions: hope, apprehension, and a fierce determination to prove herself not just to the world, but to her family as well. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Veronica's team worked around the clock, managing the public relations storm while simultaneously preparing for the legal battles ahead. She hired top-tier lawyers, not just to defend against Caldwell's threats, but to pursue charges against Madeline and her co-conspirators. One afternoon, as Veronica was reviewing documents in her office, her assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Frank Oakridge. The old vintner walked in, his weathered face a mix of emotions. "So," he said gruffly, "you turned out to be a big shot after all." Veronica stood, unsure of how to respond. "Frank, But before she could continue, Frank held up a hand. "Sarah told me everything, and I mean everything." He fixed her with a stern look. "You should have trusted us, girl. We would have stood by you." Veronica felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I know that now, and I'm sorry. More sorry than you can know." Frank's expression softened. "Well, what's done is done. Question is, what are you going to do now? All this power, all these big ideas. You going to remember us little guys?" A smile spread across Veronica's face. "Actually, I was hoping you might help me with that. How would you feel about heading up a new initiative? Something to support and elevate small family-owned vineyards?" Frank's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Me? You want me to, what, be some kind of consultant?" "More than that," Veronica said, warming to the idea. "An advocate, someone who understands the challenges, who can help shape policies that will make a real difference." As they discussed the possibilities, Veronica felt a sense of things coming full circle. Her journey as Veronica Lancaster had given her skills and perspectives she never would have gained as Eleanor Hayes. Now, she had the chance to use that knowledge to make a real difference in the industry she loved. The next big hurdle came in the form of a board meeting at Pacific Coast Distributors. Veronica had been working towards this acquisition for months, and now, with her true identity revealed, the stakes were higher than ever. As she entered the boardroom, Veronica could feel the tension in the air. Some board members eyed her with skepticism, others with barely concealed hostility, but she had come prepared. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I know many of you have concerns about recent revelations. You're wondering if you can trust me, if this acquisition is still in your best interests. Let me assure you, not only is it in your best interests, but it's also crucial for the future of this industry." Over the next hour, Veronica laid out her vision in detail. She presented projections showing how Pacific Coast Distributors would benefit from her connections and innovations. She outlined plans for expanding into new markets, while also supporting local boutique wineries. And most importantly, she demonstrated how her unique position, straddling both the old world of wine and the new, made her the perfect leader to guide the company into the future. By the end of the meeting, even her staunchest opponents were nodding along. The vote to approve the acquisition was unanimous. As Veronica left the boardroom, she allowed herself a moment of quiet celebration. This was more than just a business victory. It was a statement. She was here to stay, and she was going to reshape the industry on her own terms. But even as she savored this triumph, Veronica knew the real battles were just beginning. Madeline was still out there, no doubt plotting her counterattack. The legal challenges would be complex and potentially drawn out, and there was still the matter of fully reconciling with her past, including the parents she had left behind. That evening, as Veronica stood on the balcony of her penthouse office looking out over the Los Angeles skyline, she felt a presence beside her. Lucas had arrived for their scheduled strategy meeting, but instead of heading inside, he joined her in silent contemplation of the city lights. "You know," he said finally, his voice soft, "there were so many times over the years when I thought I saw you. In a crowd, across a restaurant. I'd blink, and you'd be gone. I told myself I was going crazy." Veronica turned to look at him, seeing the mix of regret and admiration in his eyes. "Lucas, He held up a hand, stopping her. "No, let me finish. What I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't trust you, didn't fight for you, and I'm in awe of what you've accomplished." Veronica felt a tightness in her chest, old feelings warring with new realities. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Lucas spoke again. "So what's next on this grand plan of yours?" A slow smile spread across Veronica's face. "Well, now that you mention it, I have some ideas about revolutionizing sustainable practices in the industry. Care to hear them?" As they moved inside to begin their meeting, Veronica felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. She had reclaimed her past, secured her present, and was now poised to shape the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, not as Eleanor Hayes, not even as Veronica Lancaster, but as the woman she had become, a blend of both, complex, resilient, and utterly unique. The path forward was clear, and Veronica was ready to lead the way into a new era for the wine industry, one built on transparency, innovation, and a deep respect for the art and science of winemaking. The best vintages, after all, are those that honor tradition while embracing the future. And Veronica Lancaster was determined to be the finest vintage of them all. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the vineyards of Lancaster Estates as Veronica walked the rows of vines, her fingers brushing against the leaves. In the months since her dramatic revelation at the Wine Industry Summit, she had faced a whirlwind of challenges, each one testing her resolve and pushing her to grow in ways she never imagined. As she reached the crest of a hill, Veronica paused, taking in the vista before her. Row upon row of meticulously tended vines stretched out, a testament to her vision and hard work. But the beauty of the scene belied the struggles that had brought her to this point. Her mind drifted back to the first major obstacle she'd faced after the summit, the legal onslaught from Caldwell Vineyards. Madeline, true to her vindictive nature, had unleashed a barrage of lawsuits, ranging from defamation to corporate espionage. The allegations were baseless, but the threat they posed was very real. Veronica remembered the sleepless nights poring over legal documents, the tense strategy sessions with her lawyers, and the constant worry that one misstep could bring everything crashing down. But it was during this time that she discovered a well of inner strength she didn't know she possessed. One particularly grueling day stood out in her memory. She had just finished a 6-hour deposition, feeling drained and disheartened. As she left the law offices, she found Sarah waiting for her, a bottle of Oak Ridge's finest Pinot Noir in hand. "Thought you could use this," Sarah had said with a sympathetic smile. They had retreated to Veronica's apartment, where over glasses of wine, Veronica had finally allowed herself to voice her fears. "What if it's all for nothing, Sarah?" she had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if Madeline wins and I lose everything again?" Sarah had fixed her with a steady gaze. "Then you'll build it all back up again. That's who you are, V. You're a fighter, a survivor, and this time you're not alone." Those words had been a turning point for Veronica. She realized that her strength didn't come just from within, but from the connections she had forged, the trust she had built. It was a far cry from the isolated, paranoid woman who had first arrived in Oregon years ago. With renewed determination, Veronica had thrown herself back into the legal battle. She worked tirelessly with her team, meticulously building their defense, while also gathering more evidence of Madeline's wrongdoings. It was painstaking work, but slowly, the tide began to turn. The breakthrough came 3 months after the initial suits were filed. One of Madeline's key conspirators, feeling the pressure of the investigation, decided to cut a deal. His testimony, combined with the mountain of evidence Veronica's team had accumulated, was devastating to Madeline's case. Veronica could still picture the look of shock and fury on Madeline's face as the judge dismissed the lawsuits against Lancaster Wines and instead ordered an investigation into Caldwell Vineyard's business practices. It was a decisive victory, but Veronica knew it was just the beginning. As she continued her walk through the vineyard, Veronica's thoughts turned to the business challenges she had faced. Winning the legal battle had been crucial, but rebuilding the Hayes family's legacy and establishing Lancaster Wines as a major player in the industry had been a different kind of struggle altogether. The acquisition of Pacific Coast Distributors had given her a solid foundation, but integrating the company into her growing empire had been far from smooth. There had been resistance from old guard executives, skeptical of her vision for a more ethical, sustainable approach to the wine business. Veronica smiled ruefully, remembering the contentious board meeting where she had laid out her plans for overhauling the company's sourcing practices. The CFO, a man who had been with Pacific Coast for over 2 decades, had scoffed openly. "With all due respect, Ms. Lancaster," he had said, his tone making it clear he held little respect for her, "these feel-good policies might play well in the press, but they'll eat into our profits. The shareholders won't stand for it." Veronica had felt a flicker of self-doubt, the ghost of Eleanor Hayes whispering that she was out of her depth. But then she had taken a deep breath, squaring her shoulders and meeting the CFO's gaze head-on. "Gentlemen," she had said, her voice steady and confident, "I understand your concerns. Change is always difficult, but let me be clear. We're not just chasing short-term profits here. We're building something sustainable, something that will outlast all of us in this room." She had gone on to present a detailed analysis showing how ethical sourcing and support for small vineyards could actually increase their market share in the long run, tapping into the growing consumer demand for responsibly produced wines. "We have the chance to be leaders here," she had concluded, "to set the standard that the rest of the industry will have to follow. Now who's with me?" The silence that followed had been tense, but then slowly, heads began to nod. By the end of the meeting, even the skeptical CFO had come around, grudgingly admitting that her plan had merit. It had been a pivotal moment, not just for the company, but for Veronica herself. She had stood her ground, trusting in her vision and her ability to lead. It was a far cry from the woman who had once let others dictate her path. As Veronica reached the end of the vineyard, she came to the newly constructed visitor center. The modern building, with its sweeping glass walls offering panoramic views of the estate, was a physical manifestation of her forward-thinking approach to the business. Inside, she found Frank Oakridge talking animatedly with a group of small vineyard owners. The Smallholder Support Initiative, as they had come to call it, had been one of Veronica's proudest achievements. By providing resources, training, and fair partnerships to family-owned vineyards, Lancaster Wines was not only securing a diverse and high-quality supply chain, but also preserving the rich heritage of American winemaking. Frank caught sight of her and waved her over. "Perfect timing," he called out. "We were just discussing the new sustainable pest control methods. Care to weigh in?" As Veronica joined the conversation, she marveled at how natural it felt. She was equally comfortable discussing the minutiae of vineyard management with seasoned growers, as she was negotiating multi-million-dollar deals in boardrooms. It was a balance she had worked hard to achieve, and it gave her a unique edge in the industry. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, tastings, and strategy sessions. As evening fell, Veronica found herself back in her office, gazing out at the twinkling lights of Los Angeles in the distance. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, turning to see Lucas entering with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Thought you could use a break," he said, setting the glasses down on her desk. "This is from the new blend we've been working on. Want to give it a try?" Veronica nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Her relationship with Lucas had evolved into something she never expected, a partnership based on mutual respect and a shared vision for the future of the industry. The romantic spark that had once existed between them had been tempered by time and circumstance, transforming into something deeper and more enduring. As they sipped the wine, discussing its notes and potential, Veronica felt a surge of gratitude. She had come so far from the broken woman who had fled Los Angeles years ago. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged stronger for it. But even as she savored this moment of peace, a nagging worry tugged at the back of her mind. Madeline had been suspiciously quiet since the dismissal of her lawsuits. Veronica knew her well enough to know that she wouldn't give up so easily. What was she planning? And when would she strike next? As if reading her thoughts, Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. "We've heard some rumors," he said quietly. "Madeline's been meeting with some of our biggest competitors. I think she's trying to form some kind of alliance against us." Veronica nodded slowly, her mind already racing with potential countermoves. "We knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. We'll need to be prepared for whatever she throws at us next." "We will be," Lucas assured her. "We're stronger now, more united. Whatever Madeline's planning, we can handle it." As they continued to talk strategy late into the night, Veronica felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The challenges ahead would be formidable, but she was ready to face them head-on. She had built something remarkable, something worth fighting for, and she would not let anyone, not Madeline, not her doubters, not even her own fears, take it away from her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Veronica and her team prepared for whatever Madeline might be planning. They strengthened their relationships with key partners, shored up their defenses, and even began exploring potential acquisitions that could further solidify their position in the market. It was during this time that Veronica faced one of her most personal challenges yet. Her mother, Victoria Hayes, had finally agreed to meet with her. The reunion was set to take place at a neutral location, a small upscale restaurant in Santa Barbara. As Veronica drove up the coast, her stomach in knots, she couldn't help but reflect on her complicated relationship with her mother. Victoria had always been a demanding presence in her life, pushing her to be perfect, to uphold the Hayes family name at all costs. Their last interaction, just after the scandal broke, had been cold and dismissive. Victoria's words, "You've brought shame to this family," had haunted Veronica for years. Arriving at the restaurant, Veronica took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever might come. She spotted Victoria immediately, sitting ramrod straight at a corner table, looking as immaculate and intimidating as ever. "Eleanor," Victoria said, as Veronica approached, her tone carefully neutral. "Or should I call you Veronica now?" Veronica sat down, meeting her mother's gaze steadily. "Veronica is fine, Mother. It's who I am now." What followed was perhaps the most honest conversation they had ever had. Victoria spoke of her regret at not standing by her daughter, of the pain of believing she had lost her forever. Veronica, in turn, shared the hurt and betrayal she had felt, not just from the scandal, but from years of feeling like she could never measure up to her mother's expectations. "I was wrong," Victoria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was so focused on protecting our name, our legacy, that I forgot what truly mattered. You, my daughter." Veronica felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I needed you, Mother. I needed you to believe in me, to fight for me." "I know," Victoria replied, reaching across the table to take Veronica's hand. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right, if you'll let me." As they continued to talk, Veronica felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The reconciliation wasn't perfect. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild, but it was a start. And for the first time in years, Veronica felt like she had her mother back. Returning to Los Angeles, Veronica threw herself back into work with renewed energy. The conversation with her mother had given her a sense of closure, allowing her to fully embrace her identity as Veronica Lancaster, while also reclaiming the parts of Eleanor Hayes that she had been afraid to acknowledge. It was this newfound sense of wholeness that gave her the strength to face the next major challenge, a hostile takeover attempt orchestrated by Madeline. The attack came suddenly and from multiple fronts. A consortium of competitors, led by Madeline, began aggressively buying up shares of Lancaster wines on the open market. At the same time, they launched a smear campaign, reviving old rumors about Eleanor Hayes and questioning Veronica's competence to lead the company. For a moment, Veronica felt the old panic rising, but then she remembered how far she had come, the allies she had gathered, the strength she had built. She called an emergency meeting with her executive team. "All right," she said, standing at the head of the conference table, her voice steady and determined. "They want a fight. Let's give them one." Over the next few days, Veronica and her team worked around the clock, implementing a multi-pronged defense strategy. They shored up support from key shareholders, launched a vigorous PR campaign highlighting Lancaster Wines' successes and ethical practices, and even initiated a few strategic acquisitions of their own to strengthen their market position. The battle raged on for weeks, with both sides trading blows in the press and the boardroom. It was exhausting, nerve-wracking work, but Veronica found herself thriving under the pressure. She was in her element, using every skill she had honed over the years, from her deep industry knowledge to her newfound leadership abilities. The turning point came during a crucial shareholders' meeting. Madeline, thinking she had the upper hand, called for a vote of no confidence in Veronica's leadership. It was a bold move, one that could have spelled the end for Lancaster Wines if it had succeeded. As Veronica stood to address the shareholders, she felt a moment of déjà vu, remembering the wine industry summit where she had first revealed her true identity. But this time, there was no fear, no doubt. She knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I know many of you have concerns. You've heard rumors, accusations, doubts about my ability to lead this company. Let me be clear. Every challenge we've faced, every obstacle we've overcome has only made us stronger." She went on to outline Lancaster Wines' achievements under her leadership, the increased market share, the industry-leading sustainability initiatives, the support for small vineyards that was revitalizing the American wine landscape. "But this isn't just about business," she continued, her passion evident in every word. "It's about vision. It's about creating a legacy that we can all be proud of. When you invested in Lancaster Wines, you invested in a future where quality, integrity, and innovation go hand in hand. I'm asking you today to reaffirm that investment, to stand with us as we continue to transform this industry for the better." As she concluded her speech, Veronica held her breath, waiting for the reaction. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It grew louder and louder until the entire room was on its feet, giving her a standing ovation. The vote that followed was decisive. Not only was the no-confidence motion defeated, but the shareholders also approved a new measure giving Veronica and her team even greater authority to pursue their vision for the company. As the meeting adjourned, Veronica caught sight of Madeline slipping out of the room, her face a mask of fury and defeat. For a moment their eyes met, and Veronica felt a mix of emotions, vindication certainly, but also a strange sense of pity. Madeline had spent so long trying to destroy her that she had lost sight of everything else. Later that evening, as Veronica celebrated the victory with her team, she found a quiet moment to step outside. Looking up at the stars, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From the ashes of Eleanor Hayes, she had risen as Veronica Lancaster. But now, she realized, she was something more, a perfect blend of both identities, stronger and more resilient than either could have been alone. As she raised a glass to the night sky, Veronica made a silent toast to the past that had shaped her, the present she had fought for, and the future she would continue to build. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, more battles to be won. But standing there, under the vast expanse of the California sky, Veronica Lancaster felt ready for whatever might come. She was, at last, truly herself, and that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all. The Los Angeles Convention Center buzzed with anticipation as the wine industry's elite gathered for the annual Vino Vista Expo. This year's event promised to be unlike any other, with Lancaster Wines set to unveil a revolutionary new sustainable winemaking process that had the entire industry talking. Veronica Lancaster stood backstage, her heart racing as she reviewed her notes one last time. This presentation wasn't just about showcasing innovation, it was the culmination of years of planning, the moment when all the pieces of her carefully constructed plan would finally fall into place. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, appearing at her side with a reassuring smile. Veronica took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be. Is everything in place?" Sarah nodded, her expression turning serious. Team's all set. Lucas just texted. Madeline's here, front row center. Looks like she couldn't resist the chance to see what we're up to. A small, determined smile played at the corners of Veronica's lips. Perfect. Let's give her a show she'll never forget. As Veronica stepped onto the stage, the crowd's applause washed over her. She scanned the sea of faces, quickly locating Madeline in the front row. Her nemesis sat with an air of smug superiority, clearly expecting to witness a failure. Beside her, Lucas caught Veronica's eye, giving an almost imperceptible nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," Veronica began, her voice clear and confident, "thank you for joining us today. At Lancaster Wines, we've always believed that the future of our industry lies in innovation, sustainability, and above all, integrity." She launched into her presentation, detailing the new winemaking process that promised to reduce water usage by 40%, while enhancing the natural flavors of the grapes. As she spoke, she could see the crowd becoming more and more engaged, leaning forward in their seats, furiously taking notes. Madeline, however, looked increasingly bored and irritated. Veronica suppressed a smile, knowing what was coming next. "But today," she continued, her tone shifting, "I'm not just here to talk about the future of winemaking. I'm here to address the past, specifically a past built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal." A murmur ran through the crowd. Madeline's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. 4 years ago, the wine world was rocked by a scandal involving Eleanor Hayes, heir to the Hayes Vineyards empire. We all remember the salacious photos, the accusations of infidelity, the fall from grace. It was the perfect story. Almost too perfect, in fact. Veronica paused, letting the tension build. She could see Madeline shifting uncomfortably in her seat, while Lucas sat perfectly still, his gaze never leaving Veronica. "What if I told you that the entire scandal was fabricated? That Eleanor Hayes was the victim of an elaborate plot to destroy her reputation and seize control of her family's company?" The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. Madeline half rose from her seat, but Lucas placed a restraining hand on her arm, his expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Veronica said, her voice ringing out clear and strong, "my name is not Veronica Lancaster. I am Eleanor Hayes." The room erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed, people leapt to their feet, and a cacophony of voices filled the air. But Veronica's focus remained on Madeline, whose face had drained of all color. "Security!" Madeline shouted, her voice shrill with panic. "This woman is an imposter! Remove her from the stage immediately!" But no one moved. Instead, all eyes were riveted to the large screen behind Veronica, where a series of documents, emails, and financial records began to appear. "For the past 4 years, I've been gathering evidence," Veronica continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "Evidence that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Madeline Caldwell, in collusion with others, orchestrated my downfall for her own personal gain." She began to methodically present the evidence, each revelation more damning than the last. Emails detailing the plan to fake the photos, financial records showing payments to the photographers and digital manipulation experts, sworn statements from individuals involved in the scheme. As the evidence mounted, Veronica could see the realization dawning on the faces of those in the crowd. Shock gave way to anger, then to a kind of horrified fascination. Madeline, for her part, looked like she was about to be sick. "But why?" someone in the audience called out. "Why go to all this trouble? Why not just come forward with the truth immediately?" Veronica's expression softened slightly. "Because sometimes the truth isn't enough. I needed to understand the full scope of what had been done, not just to me but to the entire industry, and I needed to be in a position to do something about it." She turned her gaze directly to Madeline. "Madeline Caldwell didn't just try to destroy me. She used her ill-gotten gains to manipulate markets, to pressure smaller vineyards into unfair deals, to prioritize profit over quality and sustainability. In short, she betrayed everything that this industry stands for." Madeline finally found her voice, leaping to her feet. "You can't prove any of this," she shrieked. "It's all lies, fabrications. You're nothing but a bitter, delusional woman trying to reclaim a life she threw away." The room fell silent, all eyes darting between Madeline and Veronica. It was the moment of truth, the confrontation that had been years in the making. Veronica's voice was calm but steely when she responded. "You're right about one thing, Madeline. I'm trying to reclaim my life, but I didn't throw it away. You stole it. And now I'm taking it back." With a nod to her team offstage, Veronica triggered the final part of her presentation. On the screen appeared a series of video confessions. Employees of Caldwell Vineyards, digital experts, even one of Madeline's closest confidants, all detailing their roles in the scheme and Madeline's central part in it. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Madeline's face crumpled as she realized the full extent of her defeat. She turned to Lucas, desperation in her eyes. "Cousin, you can't let this happen. You know what it will do to our family, to the company." But Lucas slowly stood up, his expression a mix of regret and resolve. "I'm sorry, Madeline, but this has to end. What you did, what we all allowed to happen, it was wrong. It's time to face the consequences." As if on cue, 2 police officers entered the auditorium, making their way towards Madeline. The crowd parted to let them through, a palpable sense of shock and anticipation hanging in the air. "Madeline Caldwell," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and corporate espionage. You have the right to remain silent." As Madeline was led away, her angry protests fading into the distance, a stunned silence fell over the room. Veronica took a deep breath, knowing that the hardest part was yet to come. "I know this is a lot to process," she said, addressing the crowd once more, "and I know many of you have questions. I'm prepared to answer them all, but first, I want to talk about where we go from here." Over the next hour, Veronica laid out her vision for the future of the industry. She spoke of transparency, of ethical practices, of supporting small vineyards, and prioritizing quality over quick profits. It was the same vision she had been working towards as Veronica Lancaster, but now imbued with the weight of her true identity and the journey she had undergone. As she spoke, she could see the mood in the room shifting. Shock and disbelief gave way to interest, then to excitement. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. In the aftermath of her revelation, Veronica found herself surrounded by a whirlwind of activity. Journalists clamored for exclusive interviews. Industry leaders sought private meetings, and social media exploded with hashtags like Eleanor Returns and Wine Industry Shakeup trending worldwide. But amidst the chaos, there were 3 conversations that Veronica knew she needed to have. The first was with Sarah and Frank Oakridge. She found them in a quiet corner of the convention center, both looking shell-shocked. "So," Frank said gruffly as she approached, "Eleanor Hayes, huh? Guess that explains a few things." Veronica felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so sorry for deceiving you both. You took me in, taught me, trusted me. I hope you can understand why I kept the truth from you." Sarah stepped forward, enveloping Veronica in a tight hug. "Oh, V, or should I say E, you dummy. Did you really think this would change how we feel about you?" Frank nodded, his eyes suspiciously moist. "Your family, girl. Doesn't matter what name you go by. We're just glad you finally told us the truth." Veronica felt tears pricking at her own eyes as she hugged them both. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The second conversation was with her parents. Victoria and George Hayes had watched the entire presentation from the back of the room, and now they stood before her, a mix of emotions playing across their faces. "Eleanor," Victoria began, her voice quavering slightly. We're so sorry. We should have believed in you, should have fought for you." George nodded, tears streaming freely down his face. "We failed you, sweetheart. Can you ever forgive us?" Veronica took a deep breath, years of hurt and anger warring with the love she still felt for her parents. "It won't be easy," she said finally. "We have a lot to work through. But I'd like to try, if you're willing." As her parents embraced her, Veronica felt a piece of her heart that had been locked away for years finally begin to heal. The final conversation, and perhaps the most difficult, was with Lucas. She found him on the rooftop terrace of the convention center, staring out at the Los Angeles skyline. "So," he said as she joined him at the railing, "I guess we have a lot to talk about." Veronica nodded, unsure where to begin. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared history. Finally, Lucas turned to face her. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor, for not believing you, for not fighting harder to uncover the truth. I let you down in every possible way." "You did," Veronica agreed, her voice soft but firm. "But you also helped me when I came back as Veronica. You risked everything to help bring Madeline to justice." Lucas shook his head ruefully. It doesn't make up for what I did, what I didn't do. No, it doesn't, Veronica said, but it's a start. They lapsed into silence again, both acutely aware of the weight of their shared past and the uncertainty of their future. Where do we go from here? Lucas asked finally. Veronica turned to look out at the city, the place where she had lost everything and now improbably reclaimed it all. I don't know, she admitted, but I do know this. Whatever happens next, it'll be on my terms. No more hiding, no more running. Lucas nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I wouldn't expect anything less. You always were the strongest of us all, Eleanor. Or do you prefer Veronica now? She considered for a moment. You know, I think I'm both. Eleanor Hayes and Veronica Lancaster. They're both part of who I am now. I don't want to choose between them. Well then, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster, Lucas said, extending his hand. I look forward to seeing what you do next. And I hope that maybe I can be a part of it, in whatever way you'll have me. Veronica looked at his outstretched hand, then back up at his face. She saw regret there, yes, but also hope, admiration, and something else. Something that reminded her of the young man she had once loved. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. We'll see, she said, allowing a small smile to cross her face. One step at a time. As they stood there hand in hand, looking out over the city, Veronica felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be legal battles to fight, a company to rebuild, relationships to repair. But for the first time in years, she felt truly, completely herself. She was Eleanor Hayes, heir to a wine empire, who had lost everything. She was Veronica Lancaster, self-made entrepreneur, who had built something new from the ashes of her old life. And now she was both stronger, wiser, and ready to shape the future of the industry she loved. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, casting the city in a warm, golden glow, Veronica took a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, in this moment, she allowed herself to savor her victory. She had reclaimed her name, exposed the truth, and set in motion changes that would ripple through the entire industry. Whatever came next, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster was ready to face it head-on. The days following the Vino Vista Expo were a whirlwind of activity. The revelation of Eleanor's true identity and the exposure of Madeline's crimes sent shockwaves through the wine industry and beyond. News outlets clamored for interviews, legal experts debated the implications of the case, and social media buzzed with discussions about corporate ethics and the power of redemption. Veronica found herself at the center of a media storm, but she navigated it with a grace and poise that left many in awe. In interview after interview, she told her story, not just of the betrayal and her years in hiding, but of what she had learned, how she had grown, and her vision for the future of the industry. This isn't just about clearing my name, she said, during a particularly poignant 60 Minutes interview. It's about setting a new standard for how we do business. It's about creating an industry that values integrity as much as it values the quality of its wines. Her words resonated far beyond the wine world. Veronica quickly became a symbol of resilience and ethical leadership, invited to speak at business schools and corporate retreats. She used every opportunity to advocate for greater transparency in business practices and support for small family-owned operations. But even as she embraced her role as a public figure, Veronica never lost sight of the personal relationships that had sustained her through her journey. She made good on her promise to work on rebuilding her relationship with her parents. It wasn't always easy. Years of hurt and misunderstanding didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, over long dinners and quiet walks through the vineyard, they began to heal. Victoria, in particular, seemed determined to make amends, throwing herself into supporting Veronica's vision for the company with a passion that surprised everyone. Her friendship with Sarah and Frank Oakridge deepened, if anything. They became key advisors in her efforts to support small vineyards, with Frank heading up a new initiative to provide resources and mentorship to family-owned operations. And then there was Lucas. Their relationship remained complicated, the weight of their shared history both a bond and a barrier. But as they worked together to reshape Caldwell Vineyards in the wake of Madeline's arrest, they found a new rhythm, a partnership based on mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. One evening, about a month after the expo, Veronica found herself walking through the Hayes family vineyard, the same one where she had played as a child and later learned the intricacies of winemaking. The vines were heavy with ripe grapes, almost ready for harvest. As she crested a hill, she saw a familiar figure waiting for her. Lucas, a bottle of wine, and 2 glasses in hand. "I thought I might find you here," he said as she approached. "Thought you might want to try this." He held up the bottle and Veronica's breath caught in her throat. It was a Hayes Vineyards Cabernet, vintage 2020, the last wine she had helped create before her world fell apart. "How did you get this?" she asked, taking the bottle with reverent hands. Lucas smiled softly. "I kept a case. Somehow I could never bring myself to drink it. But I thought maybe it was time." They sat on the grass, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Lucas poured the wine, and they both took a moment to savor the aroma before taking a sip. The flavor exploded on Veronica's tongue, rich, complex, with notes of blackberry and oak. But more than that, it tasted of memory, of the person she used to be and the woman she had become. "It's beautiful," she said softly, a single tear trailing down her cheek. Lucas nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "It is, just like its creator." They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping the wine and watching the sun dip below the horizon. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Veronica turned to Lucas. "You know, for years I dreamed of this moment," she said softly. "Coming back here, drinking this wine, proving to everyone that I wasn't who they thought I was. But now that I'm here, I realize something." "What's that?" Lucas asked, his voice equally quiet. "That it's not about proving anything to anyone else. It's about being true to myself. Eleanor, Veronica, they're both me, and I'm proud of who I've become, of what I've built." Lucas nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "You should be. What you've accomplished. It's extraordinary, Eleanor, or Veronica, or both." She laughed softly, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. "I think I like both. Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster. It's a mouthful, but it feels right." "Well then, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster," Lucas said, raising his glass. "Here's to new beginnings, and to being true to ourselves." They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing out in the quiet of the vineyard. As Veronica took another sip of the wine, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she was ready to face them. The next few months were a blur of activity. The legal proceedings against Madeline moved forward, with Veronica testifying in court about the extent of the conspiracy. It was a grueling process, forcing her to relive some of the most painful moments of her past. But she stood firm, her testimony clear and unwavering. Madeline, for her part, seemed to crumble under the weight of the evidence against her. Gone was the polished, confident woman who had orchestrated Eleanor's downfall. In her place was a bitter, angry shell, lashing out at everyone around her. The day the verdict was read, Veronica sat in the courtroom, her back straight, her gaze steady. As the judge pronounced Madeline guilty on all counts, sentencing her to years in prison and millions in fines, Veronica felt no joy, no sense of triumph. Instead, there was only a quiet relief, a closing of a chapter that had dominated her life for so long. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by a sea of reporters, Veronica made a brief statement. "Today, justice has been served. But this isn't about revenge or retribution. It's about accountability, about setting things right. My hope is that we can all learn from this, that we can build an industry and a society based on integrity, transparency, and mutual respect." Her words made headlines across the country, cementing her status as not just a business leader, but a voice for ethical change. In the wake of the trial, Veronica threw herself into reshaping the wine industry. She merged Hayes Vineyards and Lancaster Wines, creating a new entity that combined the best of both worlds, the historical prestige of the Hayes name with the innovative, forward-thinking approach of Lancaster. But she didn't stop there. Remembering her own struggles and the kindness shown to her by the Oakridges, Veronica launched a series of initiatives aimed at supporting small, family-owned vineyards. She established mentorship programs, created a fund to help struggling vineyards modernize their operations, and used her considerable influence to advocate for policies that would level the playing field in the industry. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Trade publications hailed her as a visionary, and she was invited to speak at industry conferences around the world. But for Veronica, the real satisfaction came from seeing the impact of her work on the ground, watching small vineyards thrive, seeing innovation and sustainability become industry standards rather than exceptions. Through it all, she maintained the close relationships that had sustained her. Sarah became her right-hand woman, bringing her down-to-earth perspective and keen business acumen to every project. Frank continued to head up the small vineyard initiative, his gruff exterior hiding a passion for nurturing the next generation of winemakers. Her parents, too, became an integral part of her life again. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, old hurts that resurfaced unexpectedly. But they were trying, all of them, to build something new and stronger than what they had before. And Lucas remained a constant presence, a partner in both business and life. Their relationship evolved slowly, cautiously, both of them acutely aware of their history and the potential for hurt. But as the months passed, they found themselves growing closer, rediscovering the connection that had first brought them together all those years ago. It was on a crisp autumn evening, almost a year to the day after the Vino Vista Expo, that everything came full circle. Veronica stood on the balcony of the Hayes family home, overlooking the vineyard where the grapes for their flagship wine were grown. The harvest was in full swing, the air filled with the sweet scent of ripe fruit and the sounds of workers calling to each other among the vines. Lucas joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Veronica leaned into him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how much has changed, and yet how some things feel exactly the same." Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's been quite a journey." "It has," Veronica agreed. "And it's not over yet. There's still so much to do, so much we can accomplish." "Together?" Lucas asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Veronica turned to face him, reaching up to cup his cheek in her hand. "Together," she confirmed, "if you're ready for that." Lucas's answer was to lean down and kiss her, soft and sweet and full of promise. As they broke apart, Veronica felt a surge of emotion, love, hope, excitement for the future. "Come on," she said, taking Lucas's hand. "Let's go down to the harvest. I want to get my hands dirty." As they made their way down to the vineyard, joining the workers in plucking ripe grapes from the vines, Veronica felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, among the vines, building something beautiful, surrounded by the people she loved. She was Eleanor Hayes and Veronica Lancaster, a woman who had lost everything and fought her way back. She was a daughter, a friend, a leader, and now, perhaps, a lover once again. She was the sum of all her experiences, all her triumphs and failures, all her joys and sorrows. And as the sun set over the vineyard, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster knew that the best was yet to come. The vintage of her life was still aging, growing richer and more complex with each passing day, and she couldn't wait to see how it would taste. The sun rose over the rolling hills of Napa Valley, casting a golden glow across the vineyard that Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster now called home. It had been 2 years since the dramatic revelations at the Vino Vista Expo, and the wine industry had undergone a seismic shift in that time. As Eleanor stood on the balcony of her modernized farmhouse, sipping her morning coffee, she reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought her to this moment. The aftermath of her revenge had been far-reaching and profound. Madeleine Caldwell's conviction had sent shockwaves through the industry, prompting a widespread re-evaluation of business practices and ethics. The scandal had exposed not just one woman's crimes, but a culture of corruption and cutthroat competition that had long festered beneath the surface of the glamorous world of wine. Eleanor had used her newfound influence to push for sweeping reforms. She spearheaded the creation of the Wine Industry Integrity Board, an independent body tasked with overseeing ethical practices and promoting transparency across the sector. The board's first act had been to implement a rigorous certification process for sustainable and ethical wine production, which quickly became the gold standard for wineries worldwide. But Eleanor's vision extended far beyond mere regulatory changes. She understood that true transformation would require a shift in the industry's very culture. To that end, she had launched the New Vintners Initiative, a program designed to support and nurture the next generation of winemakers. "The future of wine lies not in consolidation and corporate monopolies," Eleanor had declared at the initiative's launch, "but in diversity, innovation, and a return to the artisanal roots of our craft." The program provided grants, mentorship, and resources to young winemakers and small family-owned vineyards. It placed a particular emphasis on supporting women and minorities in the industry, groups that had long been underrepresented in the upper echelons of the wine world. One of the initiative's most successful projects was the resurrection of Hayes Vineyards. Rather than simply reclaiming her family's legacy, Eleanor had reimagined it. The vineyard now served as both a working winery and an educational center, where aspiring vintners could learn every aspect of the winemaking process, from vine to bottle. As she gazed out over the neat rows of vines, heavy with ripening grapes, Eleanor felt a surge of pride. This place, once a symbol of all she had lost, had become a beacon of hope and progress for the entire industry. Her reverie was interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. Lucas appeared at her side, wrapping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. "Good morning," he murmured. "Ready for the big day?" Eleanor leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with a small smile. Today marked the official launch of Hayes Lancaster Wines, the culmination of years of work and planning. The new label represented everything Eleanor had fought for, a blend of tradition and innovation, of personal redemption and industry-wide reform. As they made their way down to the winery, Eleanor's mind drifted to the many loose ends she had tied up over the past 2 years. The legal battles had been lengthy and complex, but ultimately, justice had prevailed. Madeline remained in prison, her appeals exhausted. The Caldwell family had been forced to divest much of their wine empire, with Eleanor ensuring that the proceeds went to compensate the small vineyards and workers who had suffered under Madeline's reign. Her relationship with her parents had continued to evolve. Victoria Hayes had thrown herself into supporting Eleanor's initiatives, finding a new purpose in championing ethical business practices. George, while slower to change, had eventually come around, his gruff exterior softening as he watched his daughter reshape the industry he had once dominated. Sarah and Frank Oakridge had become integral parts of Eleanor's new venture. Sarah headed up the educational programs at Hayes Vineyards, while Frank had taken on the role of chief mentor for the New Vintners initiative. Their down-to-earth wisdom and genuine passion for winemaking provided the perfect counterbalance to Eleanor's more strategic, big-picture approach. As for Lucas, their relationship had deepened and matured. The trust that had been shattered years ago had been slowly, painstakingly rebuilt. They were partners now in every sense of the word, their shared history serving as a foundation for a future they were building together. The winery was abuzz with activity when they arrived. Workers were putting the finishing touches on the displays for the launch event, while sommeliers carefully decanted bottles of their inaugural vintage. Eleanor moved through the chaos with practiced ease, checking details and offering words of encouragement to her nervous staff. As the first guests began to arrive, a mix of industry leaders, journalists, and beneficiaries of the New Vintners initiative, Eleanor retreated to her office for a moment of quiet reflection. Her gaze fell on a framed photo on her desk, taken at the Oakridge Vineyards years ago. In it, a woman with dyed brown hair and uncertain eyes stood among the vines, a far cry from the confident leader she had become. "You've come a long way," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Eleanor looked up to see Sarah leaning against the frame, a knowing smile on her face. "We both have," Eleanor replied, standing to embrace her friend. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, you know." Sarah squeezed her tight. "Oh, I think you would have found a way. You're nothing if not determined, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster." They shared a laugh, the sound filled with years of shared struggles and triumphs. As they made their way back to the main hall, Eleanor felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she had the strength and the support to face them. The launch event was a resounding success. Critics raved about the Hayes Lancaster wines, praising their complexity and depth. But it was Eleanor's speech that truly captured the audience's attention. "When I stood before you 2 years ago and revealed my true identity," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I thought I was reaching the end of a long journey. I had reclaimed my name, exposed the truth, and brought those who had wronged me to justice. But I've come to realize that it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning." She went on to outline her vision for the future of the wine industry, one built on principles of sustainability, innovation, and social responsibility. She spoke of the need to balance tradition with progress, to honor the art of winemaking while embracing new technologies and practices. "The bottle of wine you hold in your hand is more than just a beverage, she concluded. It's a story of the land that nurtured the grapes, of the people who tended the vines, of the traditions passed down through generations. But it's also a promise of the future we can create together if we have the courage to imagine it and the determination to make it real. The applause was thunderous, and as Eleanor stepped down from the podium, she was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. But her eyes sought out one person in particular. Lucas stood at the edge of the crowd, his gaze filled with pride and love. As their eyes met, Eleanor felt a familiar flutter in her chest. They had weathered so much together, had hurt each other and healed each other in equal measure. And now, finally, they were building something beautiful together. As the evening wore on, Eleanor found herself drawn to the vineyard. She slipped away from the party, walking among the vines in the soft light of dusk. The air was heavy with the scent of ripening grapes, a promise of the harvest to come. She thought about the long, winding path that had brought her to this moment, the pain of betrayal, the years of hiding, the struggle to reclaim her identity. It had all led her here. She had lost everything, had been forced to rebuild herself from the ground up. But in doing so, she had discovered strength she never knew she possessed, had forged connections deeper and more meaningful than any she had known before. Eleanor ran her hand along a cluster of grapes, feeling their weight and potential. Like these grapes, she too had been transformed. The hardships she had endured had not broken her, but had instead added depth and complexity to her character. She was no longer just Eleanor Hayes, the naive heiress, nor was she Veronica Lancaster, the woman bent on revenge. She was something new, something more, a blend of all her experiences, good and bad. As the last light faded from the sky, Eleanor heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Lucas approaching, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "I thought I might find you out here," he said, offering her a glass. "Old habits die hard, I guess." Eleanor took the glass with a smile. "Some habits are worth keeping," she replied. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their wine and watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "You know," Lucas said finally, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Eleanor turned to him, curiosity piqued by the slight nervousness in his voice. Lucas set his glass down on a nearby trellis and took both of Eleanor's hands in his. "Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster," he began, his voice soft but steady. "These past 2 years have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. We've faced our past, we've rebuilt our trust, and we've created something beautiful together. But I find myself wanting more." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as Lucas lowered himself to one knee. "I love you," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love the woman you were, the woman you became, and the woman you are now. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, supporting your dreams and building our future together. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Eleanor was transported back in time, to another proposal in another vineyard, what felt like a lifetime ago. But this time there was no doubt, no hesitation. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." As Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, a beautiful, ethically sourced diamond set in recycled gold, Eleanor felt a sense of completion. This wasn't just a new chapter in her life. It was the beginning of a whole new story. The sound of cheering broke the moment. Eleanor and Lucas looked up to see their friends and family spilling out of the winery, led by Sarah and Frank. Glasses were raised, congratulations shouted, and soon the vineyard was filled with laughter and celebration. As Eleanor moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and well wishes, she caught sight of her parents standing a little apart from the others. She made her way over to them, Lucas at her side. Victoria was the first to speak. "Eleanor," she said, her voice wavering slightly, "I know we've had our differences, and I know I've made mistakes, but I want you to know how proud I am of you, of everything you've accomplished, of the woman you've become." George nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother's right. You've done the Hayes name proud, sweetheart. More than that, you've made it mean something again." Eleanor felt tears pricking at her own eyes as she embraced her parents. It wasn't perfect. There were still wounds that needed healing, trust that needed to be rebuilt, but it was a start, a foundation for a new kind of relationship. As the impromptu engagement party continued, Eleanor found herself drawn back to the edge of the vineyard. She looked out over the valley, at the lights twinkling in the distance, and felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had lost everything, had been forced to rebuild her life from scratch. But in doing so, she had gained so much more than she had ever thought possible. She had found her true strength, had forged unbreakable bonds, and had discovered a purpose greater than herself. The path ahead was not without its challenges. There were still battles to be fought, reforms to be implemented, minds to be changed. But Eleanor was ready to face whatever came her way. She had weathered the storm, had turned her pain into purpose, and had emerged stronger for it. As she raised her glass to the night sky, Eleanor made a silent toast to second chances, to hard-won wisdom, and to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The best vintage of her life was yet to come, and she couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. But even as she savored this moment of triumph, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. The wine industry was vast and complex, with deep-rooted traditions and powerful players. Her efforts to reform it had made her both celebrated and feared, admired and resented. Eleanor knew that her work was far from over. There would be those who would resist change, who would see her vision as a threat to their own interests. And there were still secrets buried in the past, truths yet to be uncovered. As she rejoined the celebration, accepting congratulations and sharing in the joy of the moment, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end of her story, but merely the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever revelations might yet come to light, she was ready to face them. For now, though, she would celebrate. She would raise a glass with those she loved, would dance under the stars in the vineyard that had seen her fall and rise again. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities, new twists in the complex blend of her life. But tonight, Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster would savor the fruits of her labor, the sweetness of her triumph, and the promise of the future she had fought so hard to create. As the night wore on and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Eleanor found herself drawn once again to the quiet of the vineyard. She walked among the vines, trailing her fingers along the leaves, lost in thought. It was here, in the stillness of the night, that a memory surfaced, a conversation overheard years ago when she was still hiding in plain sight as Veronica Lancaster. It had seemed insignificant at the time, just another piece of industry gossip. But now, with all she had learned about the inner workings of the wine world, it took on a new and troubling significance. There had been talk of a secret consortium, a group of powerful players in the industry who operated in the shadows, manipulating markets and crushing competition. At the time, Eleanor had dismissed it as paranoid fantasy. But what if there was truth to it? What if Madeline's actions had been part of something much larger and more insidious? The thought sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. If such a group existed, her efforts to reform the industry would have made her a target. Her success in exposing Madeline and implementing new ethical standards would be seen as a threat to their power. As she stood there, the sounds of celebration fading into the background, Eleanor made a decision. She would not let fear or complacency dull her edge. She would investigate, would use all the resources and connections at her disposal to uncover the truth. If there were still battles to be fought, still injustices to be righted, then she would face them head-on. She had come too far, had sacrificed too much to stop now. With renewed determination, Eleanor turned back towards the winery, towards the light and laughter of her engagement party. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with the same courage and tenacity that had brought her this far. As she rejoined her loved ones, accepting a glass of champagne and a kiss from Lucas, Eleanor allowed herself to fully embrace the joy of the moment. But beneath her smile a fire burned, the fire of a woman who knew that her greatest fight might still be ahead of her. The story of Eleanor Veronica Hayes Lancaster was far from over. In fact, it seemed that the most exciting and potentially dangerous chapter was just beginning. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and emotional tales, make sure to subscribe to our channel to catch the new stories we share daily. And if you missed our latest story, here's what happened. The unfaithful bride was cheating on her millionaire fiancé, who was blind and paralyzed, right in front of him, in the arms of his best friend. But what she didn't know was that he already knew, and he was just waiting for the perfect moment to make them pay the highest price of their lives. Want to find out what happened next? Then click on the video appearing on your screen now and see it all unfold. I'll see you there.